Hey everyone, how's it going? Dan here. Happy Sunday. And today we are going to be talking about in-context learning, and it'll be relatively quick today. So what kind of sent me down this path was, we recently wrote a lot about few-shot prompting, and I was thinking, just generally trying to figure out the difference between the two, between few-shot prompting and in-context learning, because I feel like people use them interchangeably quite often, and so that ended up setting me down this rabbit hole. A bunch of really great papers I read through, and we'll be linking to below. And so it figured, hey, this is probably worth talking about and writing about. And was really happy with how the blog post turned out, which will be linked below as well. So we will talk about what in-context learning is, zero-shot, one-shot, few-shot learning, all those different types of methods, what the actual difference is between in-context learning and few-shot prompting, how it works, challenges, limitations, how you can optimize your prompts to leverage in-context learning if you are using this, how you can automate the process of generating those examples, and then a little bit at the end about whether this can be really defined as learning. So two major papers we'll pull from. One is a survey, so it's kind of like a meta paper essentially that has a bunch of links to a bunch of awesome papers that have been written over the years about in-context learning, and then another one called Auto-ICL, which is going to be helpful in automating that process of generating high-quality examples. And so to just ground us here with a definition, generally in-context learning is where a method where LLMs learn tasks by using one example or a few examples embedded directly in the prompt, and this is what is that context. So that context that's being sent along is helping the model learn about structure, tone, style of the preferences for the output. Essentially, it comes down to showing versus telling, which I have found to be really helpful for people when writing prompts. People often have a hard time, or their prompts get super long when they're injecting so many nuanced instructions about what the output should be, versus if you just included an example or two that shows how those instructions would actually act in an output, that can often be better and more clear. So we'll go over some just differences between zero shot, one shot, few shot real quick. So zero shot is just when you send a normal prompt, no examples. So in this case, we're saying, A, your job is to review the sentiment of product reviews. Here's a review, classify it. No examples, we're just giving it a review to classify. One shot is when you provide one example. So in this case, same prompt, except we're filling in this first sentiment. So we're saying this is what a positive review looks like, and then we're letting the model finish in this second part. And then a few shot just takes that to the next level, adds a couple more examples. And so we're giving a positive one, a negative one, a neutral one, and then we're giving the model one to finish there. So essentially, the not surprising and not super exciting difference between the two is that few-shot prompting is just one example of in-context learning. So one-shot prompting, and so are other ways that you can, any way you are providing context for the model to learn on, usually through examples. That's what in-context learning is, and few-shot prompting is just an example within in-context learning. And so, like all methods, there's positives and negatives. We really like it because of how easy it is to implement. You don't need to be technical. You don't need to be a machine learning engineer. It's relatively straightforward, especially if you have a tool like Prompt Up to Test. But there's some drawbacks. If you include examples, that's more input tokens, which will lead to more cost and slightly a little bit more latency. The reason why it's only a little bit more latency is because your input tokens don't really affect latency so much. It's more so the output tokens, and we'll link to a blog post of ours that goes over why, but essentially it's because the input tokens can be processed all at once versus the output tokens are being processed sequentially based on the previous token, so kind of one by one. Scalability, eventually, you hit a limit in terms of how many prompt tokens you can send. That's ever expanding, so it's not like hugely a drawback, but it's something to note. And also, additionally, the number of demonstrations used versus performance eventually plateaus and can even be detrimental once you get to really high numbers. So we tell teams to stay under 8. Honestly, with 2 or 3, you're pretty, I think, good to go. The model, of course, will be sensitive to the examples, so you just need to really make sure you're kind of implementing and writing your prompts correctly in terms of the quality of the examples, the order, the diversity, and we'll go over all of that in a moment. And there is some ambiguity in the learning process in terms of how the model actually is learning from the examples isn't 100% clear or knowable. So in terms of how you can optimize your prompts for in-context learning, number one, kind of, the thing is to have high quality examples. If you have poor examples or examples that don't relate to what you're trying to do, that's not going to be good. Varied examples. So for example, in our sentiment feedback classifier, we sent an example of a positive piece of feedback, a negative, and a neutral. So we're showing multiple types. So the model can kind of understand, okay, here's how I can handle basically all three of the potential outputs that we'll be handling. So you want to kind of cover your bases there. Consistent formatting. This will help the model understand structure and learn a little faster. The order can matter. There's a lot of differing opinions here. Some say do simple to complex. Some say have the most relevant example closest to the end to kind of take advantage of the model's bias to learn or to remember the most recent thing it read. So I would test around this. Randomize the order in that, if we're doing sentiment analysis and we have 8 pieces of examples, don't have all the positives and then all the negatives. You want to kind of basically stagger them. You want to have balanced distribution. So again, if we have 8 examples, we don't want 7 positives and 1 negative. This will bias the model to probably produce more positives. And then don't use too many examples, as we said before. And so that's all great, but it is and can be annoying / some amount of effort to generate these examples. So there's this really cool paper called Auto-ICL, which basically built a short framework to automate this. So basically it takes a task, generates examples, and then has another prompt that takes those examples and the original task and then gets an output from the LLM, which you can kind of see in this demonstration here. And so it's pretty straightforward. In the results, they tested against a bunch of other prompt engineering methods and found pretty solid success, even compared to some of the automated meta prompting, which we've touched on few-shot prompting, chain of thought. So it's definitely something worth testing out. And we have a couple of templates here to help you. So we broke it down into the 2 steps. First step generates the demonstrations. Second one takes those demonstrations and the original task and then solves it. And if you want, a kind of pro tip here would be to create a prompt chain to do this, so it can run both steps at once. And wrap it up. This is a little bit outside of our depth, but deeper in like the machine learning world, there's a lot of debate about whether this is really defined as learning, because traditionally learning methods is when you are doing like the pre-training or adjusting model parameters, versus in context learning, which could be argued is more pattern recognition. So to be honest, it's not super important to the work that we are doing. We're much more focused on the performance and the kind of final output versus the theory here, but it's something that's like worth looking into, and I thought was interesting and came up during our research. So that is it for today. Have a great week, and I will talk to you guys soon.